We will see how you fare against the heck of trunkeries.
The Furies are bosses, or rather big bosses, from Goraphora Ascension, which is a game that most people don't really like that much. But in my case, just like several others, I think it's really good, But it must be because of nostalgia, really. In mythology, they are 3 daughters of Uranus, Alecto, Tisiphone, and Megara. They are 3 goddesses of vengeance, or what is called divine punishment. They act mainly when there is a human involved in family murder. For example, a father killing his son, a daughter killing her father, brother against brother, and so on, and also those who offend the gods. It's no wonder that at the beginning of the game they are doing exactly that to Kratos, because he is trying to break his oath to Ares. They were extremely loyal to the gods of the underworld, also serving Hades and Persephone. They supervise the torture of the criminals who are condemned in the dungeons of the damned. In mythology, they were born when Kronos castrated Uranus, but in God of War it's a little different. They appeared during the War of the Primordials. When one of them punched the other in the face, if I'm not mistaken, in Kratos' face, the Furies were tasked, just like in mythology, with punishing the wicked and the treacherous. All 3 sisters have different appearances and powers. Pods. Alecto can transform into a sea monster. Crazy, kind of like a kraken, and Tisiphone can summon a kind of bird and can also create illusions. Past. And Megara can release some parasites that come out of the holes in her chest, and they end up entering the enemy's skin, possessing and controlling them. The first one they punished was a hecaton. It was Aegon, when the 100-armed giant made a blood oath to Zeus, but ended up betraying him later, and the Furies acted quickly. They chased Aegon, and after capturing him, tortured him until he went insane. They believed that death was too little and too kind for a blood traitor, so they ended up using his case as an example for everyone else. People. They petrified the body and turned it into a great prison where all the traitors would stay forever. But now, speaking of deaths, right? The first to die to Kratos is Megara. In fact, she ends up controlling the Aegon. Kratos climbs the beast and attacks Megara. When she's on top of Hecaton's eye, he puts the blades in her chest, throws her off Hecaton, and then falls on top of her, striking her once more. Peace. So then later on, towards the end of the game, in fact at the very end of the game, Kratos ends up facing off. Alecto, in her Kraken form, and also Tisiphone. The second death is Tisiphone, who even tries to trick him by transforming into other people, but it doesn't work. Finally, the Queen of the Furies, Alecto, takes a blade to the chest and is finished off as well.
You cast your favor on Athena, but her city lies in ruins before me, and now even Pandora's box is mine. Would you have me use it against Olympus itself?
Ares was the first one to be taken down. I mean, in the actual chronology, he came after the Furies, but in terms of game release, he was the first. And what can I tell you about Ares? He's the god of war. But what many people don't know, because, well, those who dig deeper into mythology will already know, but most people have no idea because they haven't even looked into it. He is the main god of war in Greek mythology. Many even avoided him because he was violent, very, very impulsive. And when? War Greece. When they were going to war and needed to worship a god to have luck in battle, they much preferred to go to Athena rather than Ares. And since both of them are gods of war, of course there would be a rivalry between them. And that rivalry even went to the games. It's also not me who says that Ares attacks the city of Athens. I use Ares a lot here on the channel because there are several stories of him getting beaten up, being humiliated, massacred, and so on. A lot of that is because of the Greeks' own preference for Athena. After all, if you're going to war, it's much better to have the support of a goddess of strategy than a bully on your side. Well now, the oven isn't that different after all. Ares started to covet all of Olympus, especially Zeus's throne. He made an alliance with the Furies and caused them to become more violent, let's say. The prophecy of the so-called marked warrior, who was destined to destroy all of Olympus and kill Zeus. Ares decided to have a daughter with Alecto, hoping that this child would be the marked warrior and could help him, bringing down Zeus and taking the throne and everything else. But unfortunately, Orkos, who is this child, did not live up to his father's expectations and ended up being rejected. The Furies, however, saw potential in him and made him the Oath Keeper, including work. Becoming a friend of Kratos, the gods even thought at first that he was Kratos' brother, Deimos, which is the marked warrior. Then, the Athenians entered Sparta and took Deimos. Kratos even tried to stop them, but Ares ended up striking him on the head, which left an incredible scar. Anyway, in God of War 1, which has a full analysis here on the channel, Kratos is sent to kill Ares. He was attacking the city of Athens, and for that, he needed Pandora's box. When he was there in the temple, he ended up being killed by Ares himself. Since only those who want to die actually die, he returns, opens the box, grows giant, and battles the former god of war. That's it. But unlike the Furies, Ares doesn't die by Kratos' blades. It's because those blades were given by Ares himself. Kratos then grabs a sword that's being held by two statues nearby, called the Blade of the Gods, and he kills Ares.
There is no power greater than the Sisters of Fate. If you challenge us, you will die.
The Moirai, or as Kratos loved to call them, the Sisters of Fate, are three goddesses who personified the inevitable destiny of every man, and sometimes even of some gods. Their parents change a lot depending on the version. Sometimes they are daughters of Nyx, other times of Zeus. Season. They also live on Mount Olympus, and each of them has a specific role that deals with destiny. Clotho spun the thread of life. Lachesis measured the thread using her ruler, and Atropos cut the thread when the right moment came. She could even choose how and when the person would die. Fighting. They also had the so-called Wheel of Fortune, which has nothing to do with Bondim Compania or Silvio Santos. But it explained the highs and lows in someone's life. The Moirai appear in God of War 2 well before we meet Zeus for the final battle in this universe. In a way, they control time as well. Right after Kratos is killed by Zeus, he had lost his position in divine powers, so it was impossible for him to climb Mount Olympus to get to Zeus. So he had to change the way things happened, and for that, he had to go to the island of creation, where it was, the loom of fate, and consequently, of course, the sisters themselves, and to control the loom. Of course, Kratos has to fight against the three sisters, who for some reason were very warrior-like and also very loyal to Zeus. And they absolutely didn't want to grant Kratos the power of the loom. They were afraid, of course, that he would bring destruction to Greece if he used it, which is exactly what happened. The first to appear is Laxus, who fights against Zeus alone, at least the first time. When she realizes she's getting beaten up, she uses one of her crazy powers. There, she ends up calling her sister Atropos, who is inside a mirror.
And what happens with her sister? And now that life is at an end?
And she goes with him through the mirror, going back in time to the moment when Kratos is fighting against Ares. She then threatens to kill Kratos' past by destroying the blade of the goddess, because without it, Ares would end up defeating him, and that way, the Kratos fighting against the sisters wouldn't exist. They would be erased from existence. Anyway, it's time travel stuff. It's kind of confusing. Kratos protects the sword and defeats Atropos, throwing her back into the throne room of Lachesis. Trees. Of course, they get desperate, so Lachesis and Atropos fight Kratos together. And after a battle in true God of War style with head throws, the blade of Olympus in the faces of the Moirai and everything else, Kratos. He ends up throwing both of them into the mirror and trapping them. As you can see there in the mirror, Atropos. She was kind of desperate, hitting him, so I don't think they died, right? I don't know if they got stuck in the past. I understood, but I'll note here that they left too, since they never returned to Clotho. In fact, she does escape, but I won't be able to show the whole battle between Kratos and her, because, well, let's just say she's a woman who's very well endowed. She's the most monstrous of the three, which is curious, right? Because she's completely different from the others. But anyway, in the battle against her, you have to use the time amulet a lot. And at a certain moment right there, you pull a certain blade from the scene, something like that, and pull it against Clotho's head. And then she's done for, and then...
I'm a slave to no one.
Charon. Charon isn't exactly a god. He's more like a spirit, or a daemon whose role was to receive the souls brought by Hermes and carry them across the waters to the gates of Hades. Skills. And the only thing he asked from people was a little coin that was placed in the mouth of a corpse after their burial. Those who didn't receive a proper burial and couldn't pay the fee were left there on the riverbanks. And they would wander back and forth, becoming a kind of ghost that haunted the place. Charon was depicted in Greek art as an ugly man, bearded, and with a crooked nose. Wearing a kind of conical hat or a tunic, he always stood in his little boat using a pole. 2, about to receive the souls from Hermes, and he was also a son of Nyx. I don't know exactly if Charon would be a primordial in the game, okay? Or if he took part in the War of the Primordials. Although he also has enough power to knock out Kratos at least once, he doesn't seem powerful enough to have taken part in that war or even survived it. And it even seems that the powers he has in Chains of Olympus appear to come from Persephone, not from himself. Since Charon's past was never mentioned in the games, it's possible that in the stories of God of War, our Charon may have once been a very powerful being, like the other primordials. But he ended up dying in the war, and by doing so he became an undead, which is the ferryman we see in Chains of Olympus. But it's also possible that he was a demigod, but still immortal, a jailer of Tartarus. And after dying, he would have served Hades and Persephone for all eternity. I mean eternally. Or maybe not, right? Because he died, but anyway. In Chains of Olympus, Charon is already portrayed as a tall, thin man with pale skin. He wears dark clothes with several little heads attached to them, and he also wears a golden mask that covers his face, which looks like a skull. And as a weapon, he has a large, shiny scythe, which he also uses like a cane. And for some reason, from what it seems in the game, Charon doesn't really like the job he does, which is being a ferryman. As he tells Kratos, when he arrives at the area where Charon is waiting, the ferryman refuses to give Kratos a passage, because he was still alive and Charon could only deliver the dead. So the two fight for control of the ship, and after a short battle there, Charon knocks Kratos unconscious and throws him into the depths of Tartarus. But however, nevertheless, it's Kratos, right? And after he gets the gauntlet of Zeus and escapes from Tartarus, he once again encounters Charon. And after destroying the pillars that gave life to Charon and weakening him enough, Kratos attacks him with his own scythe, but even so he survives and even tries to escape. But Kratos grabs him and keeps hitting him in the face. Until he goes down for good, finishing him off once and for all. And after defeating him, Kratos takes his golden mask, which gives him a power called the Wrath of Charon challenge.
The oracle may have spoken the truth. The marked warrior shall bring about the destruction of Olympus.
Thanatos would be a god or a personified spirit, thus also a daemon, related to non-violent death, because his touch, let's say, would be much gentler compared to the brothers he has, which would be Hypnos, who is sleep. And also the bloodthirsty sisters, those who would be violent death, the Keres, the spirits of slaughter and disease. Thanatos appears with a focus in two stories. The first one is that once he was sent to fetch Alcestis to the underworld, but he ended up being driven away by Hercules in a fight. Another time, he was captured by the criminal Sisyphus, who ended up trapping him in a sack to avoid dying. Thanatos in Gorafor is a little different actually, quite a lot. He is described as being an ancient and terrible god who existed even before the cycle of life and death, and is the reaper of all souls. He was the one imprisoning Deimos, who they thought was the marked warrior, and Zeus, Ares, and Athena were responsible for capturing Zeus. He ended up sending the brothers, and then they hid the Spartan where he wouldn't be found. But then, after Kratos, who is the true marked warrior, ended up killing Ares and became the new god of war. He ended up being called by his mother, Callisto, who told him that his brother was alive. That's for sure. That started Kratos' quest to find his brother, and also the game God of War, Ghost of Sparta. Kratos finds out where Deimos was imprisoned, so Thanatos kind of uses a body there to warn Kratos that he shouldn't continue his search. But of course, he doesn't listen. And, at a certain point, he ends up meeting Thanatos' daughter, Erinis, and defeats her. Finally, Kratos reaches the domain of death, where Deimos attacks Kratos himself, because he wasn't able to save him from Thanatos' torture. Years ago, at the final moment of the battle between Kratos and Deimos, Thanatos appears. Country. He grabs Deimos from behind, and there he speaks with great anger that Kratos had killed his daughter, and so he would finish Deimos as retribution. During the battle, Thanatos fights the brothers using his blade and takes the form of a gigantic monster, similar to a black dragon, winged and there. At the moment of the fight, Deimos ends up saving Kratos from the clutches of Thanatos, but he ends up being crushed and furious. Kratos goes after the god of death and destroys the armor he was wearing. Thanatos, who was completely destroyed, returns to his more human form, and already being all battered, Kratos finishes him off without any mercy. "I'll let you see how it happens," he says. After all that, the gravedigger, who had been a mysterious figure until then, reveals to Kratos that, because of his victory over the god of death, he ended up becoming death itself and the destroyer of worlds. Thanatos' death itself would have no consequence, however, since the gravedigger, who was actually Zeus in disguise, heard Thanatos say that Kratos was the true marked warrior. This would end up being kind of a decree that now, in fact, the gods would start a war against Kratos himself.
By the gods, what have I become? Death.
The destroyer of worlds.
His path of destruction had to be stopped. But now there is an empty throne in Olympus, and a new god of war is needed.
Athena is not hard to explain in the case of mythology, because she is a goddess of the arts, wisdom, counsel, and also of war. Athena was born directly from the head of Zeus himself after he swallowed Metis. He was there with a terrible headache, and Zeus himself asked Hephaestus to open a little crack in his head. And when he did that, Athena came out already dressed and ready for war, even though she is almost always seen as a kinder goddess. Let's put it that way. Sometimes she did some mean things, like, for example, cursing Arachne just because Athena lost to her in a weaving competition, and in Libya too. She is said to have invented the flute because when Perseus cut off Medusa's head, her sisters, Stheno and Euryale, they started to cry, and the sound that came from their mouths kind of echoed off the snakes they had on their heads. And Athena started to imitate those sounds too, first because she liked them, and also because she was mocking everything that had happened. In Goroforo, things go much further. There, she is also a goddess of war, and, as I said before, she took part with Ares in the search for Deimos. And later on, Goroforo, she kind of ended up calling Kratos so he could defeat Ares, and she helped him go after Pandora's box. After Ares' death, she revealed to Kratos that he was forgiven for his sins, but the gods had never agreed to free him from his nightmares. No mortal or god could ever forget the terrible things they had done. And with all hope lost, Kratos kind of felt abandoned there, and we go back to the beginning of God of War 1, that scene there at the cliff. However, Athena saves Kratos from falling and says that the gods have not abandoned him. In no way. Athena gives him the throne of Ares and the title of god of war. She also gives Kratos the blades of Athena to replace the blades of chaos that were given to him and later taken away by Ares. God of War 2. She also appears there at the very beginning, saying that Kratos was going too far with his army, and she tries several times to make Kratos give up his revenge against the gods. Better against gods, more specifically, at least at that moment. But Kratos doesn't care at all. And at the end of the game, when Kratos is finally about to defeat the gods with the blade of Olympus, Athena appears in front of him and takes the blow, saying that Zeus should prevail, and thus revealing that Kratos is Zeus's son also. Then she dies, but actually she ends up coming back later in her ghost form. And Olympus...
You started a war you can't win. The fates have already deemed me victorious.
No, Kratos, stop!
Athena, no.
Only a coward hides.
You know I'm one of the Furies who created your bond. You would have killed me before I could speak.
Then tell me what led you to betray your own kind.
Starting with Kratos' best friend, or at least his first one, Orkos from God of War Ascension. Actually, he's more of a demigod than a real god, but he'll make the list anyway in the games. He's the son of Ares and the Fury Alecto. Ares didn't fall in love with Alecto. Actually, he had the idea to create the perfect warrior together with her. A warrior strong enough to defeat Zeus and take Olympus for himself. But when Orkos was born, Ares realized he wasn't exactly what he thought. He was too kind to be considered a good warrior, so he decided to leave him aside. But his mother and his aunt saw potential in the boy, so they decided to take care of him and turned Orkos into the Oath Keeper, or the Guardian of the Oath. Something like that. And like every neglected child, even though he had a huge responsibility, Orkos really wanted to please those he thought loved him. People. Despite all that, Orkos saw the injustice in Kratos' oath to his father, the god of war, Ares. And just like Kratos did by distancing himself from Ares after Ares made him destroy his own family, Orkos did the same thing with the Furies. And with the help of the Oracle of Delphi, he tried to warn Zeus about Ares' plan, but the Furies were sent after him. The Oracle was completely punished, while Orkos managed to reach Kratos, who was being hunted by the Furies. This was for breaking the blood oath with Ares in their first encounter. Kratos even tries to attack Orkos because he clearly thought it was someone trying to stop him, but he stops as soon as Orkos explains it. But in Delos, the two are caught by the Furies, and much later in the game, Kratos kills the Furies and returns to Sparta, and Orkos ends up finding him there. He even congratulates him on his victory and everything else. But he says that unfortunately, he had become the Oath Keeper between Kratos and Ares, and unless he was killed by Kratos himself, this would continue. So he gives his blade to the bald guy and even tries to avoid doing it because he actually liked Orkos, but there's no other way. And Orkos dies in the mythology. Orkos was a personified spirit, that is, a daemon. He symbolized oaths exactly. He was a companion of the goddess Dike, who was justice. In mythology, he is the son of Eris, the goddess of discord.
The death of Orkos, the blood jury of Eris. It was finally broken and the painful truth returned to Kratos' mind.
Part 1 of this video is already on the channel and will be on the end screen. Once you finish this video, you can go straight to it. This is here in Brazil, so bye. See you. Bye, 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 bye. Send Charax to trick Kratos or stop him. Kratos was leading his fellow Spartans to destruction in several cities. He was then accused of killing the pet of the era, which was Argus. That's this creature with many eyes that you're seeing on the screen, and he also exists in mythology as a giant. Who? Later, he was even killed by Hermes. Charon arrives, telling Kratos to stop chasing the one who really killed Argus. But Kratos doesn't even listen to what he has to say. Then, the lamest execution of all happens, as you can see there. And with the death of Hermes' son, Kratos realized that Olympus would never accept him, and that this was just the beginning of a conflict. Soon, he would have to try to face all the gods of Olympus. And, most likely, after this battle, Hermes must have hated Kratos a lot after all. He killed his son. In mythology, Charon, like Kratos, is the youngest son of Olympus, who is the king of Eleusis, but he is also said to be the son of Hermes with that Lauro. And interestingly, there was also a class of priests in ancient Greece called Charon, who lived in Athens. Their image really reminded me of Charon from the game. Well, and also, this class of priests was said to have originated from Hermes himself.
Challenged me, mortal, the god of Olympus.
Poseidon would be one of those who got the worst of it, if he doesn't get it even worse from Kratos. In the game, he doesn't seem to stray too far from what he would actually be in mythology. So much so that, besides being a god of the seas, he also controls storms, just like in the Greek tales. He even has that famous little power he gives to Kratos in the Graphorum, where he ends up summoning lightning around his body. Poseidon is also a god of hurricanes, rain, floods, droughts, earthquakes, and horses. He was part of the Olympian Trinity, alongside Zeus and Hades. So, he is also the uncle of Athena, Ares, Hercules, and even Kratos himself. But since he never shows this directly in the games, after all, the gods aren't affectionate at all, just like in mythology. Poseidon, when he was born, ended up being a victim of Kronos' new diet, his father, which basically consisted of him devouring his own children, since the Titan knew that one of them would end him at some point. But Poseidon wasn't the chosen one, and he would spend a long time trapped in Kronos' stomach, before Zeus came and freed him along with his brothers for revenge. Poseidon willingly takes part in the war against the Titans, being one of the most powerful and decisive in what would become known as the First Titanomachy. So much so that he appears in that cutscene from God of War 2 punishing the Titans. There, he is also strong enough to one-hit kill a Titan, just like he did in God of War 3. In the Titanomachy, he also helped Hades defeat Atlas out, continuing in the war with the Olympians and being led by Zeus after his victory. Poseidon was considered one of the most important and most powerful deities of the Greek pantheon, gaining total authority over the seas and the weather as a whole. His domain was so important that Poseidon's power was considered second only to Zeus, and at least equal, if not superior, to that of Hades. Without him knowing, Poseidon, just like all his fellow gods, would fall victim to the evils released by the opening of Pandora's box. His anger would show when Kratos started meddling in the affairs of Atlantis. Done. One of Poseidon's sacred sanctuaries. The destruction of the sanctuary deeply angered the god of the seas, who promised the Spartan that he would later pay for the sin he had committed against him. As time went by, Poseidon became increasingly suspicious of Zeus's behavior, secretly doubting his ability to protect Olympus. The only thing in mythology that is most different from the game would be his depiction. He was older in mythology, with a longer beard, shorter hair, and he didn't have those tattoos all over his body. And besides that, there are also the hippocamps, Poseidon's seahorses, which weren't giant like in the game, and were used to pull Poseidon's chariot. The battle against the god of the seas happens right at the beginning of God of War 3, when Poseidon decides to face Gaia and Kratos at the same time. And that's where he lost, right? Because Kratos alone would already be a problem. But now, with a giant creature on his side. It's even worse. Poseidon starts by sending the hippocampus to hold Gaia, then he appears in a giant form. Kratos keeps freeing Gaia from the hippocampus, and then she punches Poseidon's Megazord form. Kratos jumps from Gaia's hands and pulls him out of his super form. And then, my friend, that's when a special treatment for Poseidon begins, which I can't even show you completely because YouTube won't allow it. But let's just say he gently presses Poseidon's head against the walls, shows his sandal too, and then removes some specks from his eyes. And after he leaves, the waters of the world lose control, and Poseidon's head
I tried test after test, searching for the systems, and now you've brought everything down.
Perseus is not a god, but a demigod. But anyway, I'll talk about him here too. In this case, Gorafor's Perseus is a bit curious. I tried looking for information about him outside the game, like in comics and books, but found nothing. If anyone knows, please comment. But in the game, it seems that he wasn't responsible for killing Medusa, which is his main story in mythology, because actually it was Kratos himself who did that in God of War 1. And at some point before God of War 2 starts, Perseus would have traveled to the island of creation to meet the Sisters of Fate, but he ended up getting trapped in a bath chamber. And then, when Kratos enters that chamber, he finds him. And interestingly, he has all the weapons that the mythological Perseus also has when he goes to kill Medusa. He has a shield that I'm not sure if it's the Aegis, right? Which is Zeus's shield, a sword, and Hades' helmet, which in mythology is given to him by Athena. After Kratos enters the place, Perseus blames him for having closed the only exit from the chamber. And, already crazy, he says that this must be a test, one from the sisters, that if he defeated Kratos, he could find them. A whole battle breaks out between them, and Perseus becomes a keychain. Single?
Put aside the petty grievances that have splintered us for so long. We will unite.
Perseus is one of the Titans who is climbing Mount Olympus, the one that's all covered in fire. In mythology, just like in the game, Perseus was the Titan of destruction. And, still in mythology, he is the father of one of the most famous goddesses, Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft. Being raised together with the Titan Asteria, the name Perseus means destroyer, or the devastator, and the exile. It describes him in a kind of strange way, right? Saying that he would be preeminent among all men of ignorance. His father was Creus, one of Cronus' brothers. In God 3, Perseus is expelled from Olympus by Helios, and later is seen fighting against the sun god himself and getting beaten by him. But then Creus appears, and Perseus manages with his help to catch Helios. Later, Creus is forced to kill Perseus himself, because he's climbing a mountain with his Icarus wings, and Perseus tries to slap him. But then Creus dodges, grabs the blade of Olympus, and hits Perseus right in the eye, causing a really intense scene that you'll see. Get to.
Bro, this is not between us.
Hercules is also a demigod. He's Kratos' half-brother and the son of Zeus. Interestingly, when we talk about the story of Hercules, mythology has a very similar story. Both Kratos and Hercules had their families destroyed by themselves because of the gods. Kratos was influenced by Ares and Hercules by Hera. Both of them also served the gods for many years, hoping to be forgiven and redeemed. They are both demigods and sons of Zeus. Their rage is also uncontrollable, leading to moments when they are blinded by bloodlust, like in some of Kratos' moves with the blades of chaos. He has the name of Hercules, like the spirit of Hercules, the valor of Hercules, and the power of Hercules. In mythology, Hercules has his own. The weapons, such as a club, the bow and arrow, with the poison of the Hydra and the Nemean lion's cloak, most of them were obtained in his 12 labors. In the game, he has the Nemean gauntlets, which are pretty cool, even though they don't actually exist. In the actual mythology, he also ends up becoming a god, one of the Olympians, after his death, and he marries Hebe, one of Hera's daughters, and even gets along with Queen Dolene. Interestingly, in the game, Hercules faces Kratos, with Hera watching him. For sure, she was hoping that both of them would lose and Kratos would be Hercules' last labor for the Olympians. But he ends up losing and gets a beauty treatment to the face. Considering both brothers are seeking redemption, it's sad to see them fighting. They just want forgiveness for what they did to their families. I recently released an analysis on my channel about Disney's Hercules. The video is linked in the card and description. Next one, bro.
The ghost of Sparta, then what they say is true.
This is one of the most annoying bosses in Cyber God of War. Facing this creature on Titan mode was hell for me. Such an annoying creature from CAC. But anyway, he's also a demigod, but this time he's the son of Poseidon. He appears in the Corsairs part, being a totally all might. Arrogant, he served the Sisters of Fate as a guardian of the horses and kept the key to the various locks placed on the steeds of time. Theseus, the symbol of Kratos, keeps saying several times that he was no match for the greatest warrior in all of Greece and even less for Zeus. Then, the fight between the two begins. You? Theseus, in mythology, is the one responsible for killing the Minotaur. But here, his role is more like that of a king, a crime boss, and also of from Mollusco getting handsome, let's just say he runs into the door several times. B.
You saved me from Atlas, and I promise to return you in full.
In mythology, Helios is a Titan, but in God of War, he actually looks more like an Olympian god. Or at least he considers himself one of them, since in God of War 3, right at the beginning, he says that the Titans will fail again. Either way, he is the sun itself. Helios was one of the strongest gods in the lands of Greece. In the game, from what it seems, he is only surpassed by Poseidon, Hades, Zeus, and Ares. And he even fought in both Titanomachies, siding with the Olympians. In mythology itself, he never fought, preferring not to interfere in the war on either side. Things. And besides God of War 3, he also appears in God of War, Chains of Olympus, being kidnapped by Atlas at Persephone's request. Because without Helios' light, Morpheus could act and put all the gods to sleep. But he ends up being saved by Kratos in the second Titanomachy. Helios is fighting against Perseus and is even winning, but then Kratos interferes, hits Helios' chariot, and Perseus ends up grabbing and crushing him, throwing him far away. Got it? Kratos gets to him and stretches his neck because at that moment, Helios was having a stiff neck, so Kratos ends up giving him some relief. But seriously, Helios was one of those who suffered the most at the hands of the bald guy.
That's where you're wrong.
Look who it is, Kratos! The ghost of Sparta, the god slayer, the dead man.
Hermes is also Kratos' brother. In mythology, he is the son of Zeus and Maya. He is the messenger of the gods, the god of magic, thieves, commerce, speech, and a few other things. And he's also a trickster, and in the game it seems like they adapted the same thing. Because when he appears in God of War 3, he kind of starts provoking Kratos there. And he's also wearing the winged sandals, which in mythology are made by him, even when he was still a child. to trick Apollo while he was stealing his cattle. In the game, Kratos starts chasing Hermes, who ends up with a bald guy throwing a rock from a catapult. He gets stuck on the rock and hits the statue where Hermes was, and falls down with him, with Hermes injured. Kratos takes the sandals, the winged sandals and the legs as a bonus. Then Hermes turns into several flies.
I will see you suffer as I suffered. Your soul is mine.
Hades is the third brother of the Trinity, and my favorite, actually the oldest, of Zeus and Poseidon. Being swallowed by Kronos and spending more time in his father's belly, maybe that explains his more monstrous appearance in the game. Go. Hades is the god of the underworld and the dead, and don't confuse the god of the dead who controls souls with the god of death who reaps souls, which in this case would be Thanatos' role. Hades, in his realm, was considered invincible, and not even Zeus would enter there. But in God of War, it's different. Hades first appears in God of War 1, granting Kratos powers to summon souls around him. At that time, he looked more monstrous. And at the end of 2 and in 3, he was already wearing a badass helmet before we fought him. He reminds Kratos of having killed Persephone and Poseidon, swearing revenge and using his own chains. He tries to pull Kratos' soul several times until, in the end, it's like a tug of war. There, Kratos grabs Hades' chains and throws him into a chasm. Then he comes back in a bigger and more monstrous form, and Kratos pulls Hades' soul, which falls to the ground. And with that, all the souls of the underworld escape without control, since the one who held them had died. And remember, I have a video telling the whole story of Hades in Mythology, which will be in the card, in the description, and on the end screen, there for you. If you watch the video up to here, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share the video, because it helps me a lot, all right? Thanks, see you, and goodbye. Fight.